Welcome, child kidnappers, uh, people from the Star Trek Mirror Universe, and sorry, there's not enough. There's a big cast, but not interesting enough for me to come up with three things. To episode 486 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on the 15th of August 2023, and featuring The Child, written by Colin Meek, and starring Sylvester McCoy as a doctor, Kevin Eldon as Antimony, and Sophie Aldred as Ace. I am Bill Sylvia, the one in black, and with me are technical director Mad Matt Winchell.
Check my pulse. Yep, I'm still live.
And color commentator Alex Fireheart.
Thank God my headset charger is still working.
But isn't that your new headset?
Oh yeah, I realized how low it was. And I think even though it's one of those cables that it looks like you could plug it in either way, I had it plugged in one way, and it seemed like while it wasn't losing any charge, it also didn't seem to be charging. So I flipped it, put it back in, and now it seems to be charging. It had got down to 15% or something.
My phone actually reached that again recently, and it's like, oh, is that what I was hearing just a moment ago? I guess I should plug it in.
Yeah, with the fact that my phone has been my router and TV and phone for the past 3 months, I've gotten used to it. Being like, hey, I'm at 10%. You need to stop using me. Okay, I guess I'll stop using you.
New job doesn't want me having my phone in my pocket no matter what, so it stays in the locker. The locker system, which, by the way, is interesting. At least it actually has locks compared to the previous job. And those clowns wanted us to put our wallets in there. No, fuck you. The wallets stay in my pocket unless you're monitoring that thing with a guard every 24 minutes. Every minute of the day. Heck no.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't try to sell you their own locks or something. But yeah, when I worked at a call center, they built a brand new building specifically to expand the call center. And what I never understood was why they didn't have lockers, because we weren't allowed to have our phones with us. We weren't allowed to have food with us. Like all of these things, it's just like, give us lockers, because you know that people okay, maybe some people will leave their phones in their car. You can't do that in January or your battery will die. You can't do that in July or your battery will die. Some of us didn't have cars. I walked every day. You know my phone's in my pocket. That's not that we're not allowed to have. Just, they built a... This blew my mind when I found out looking at the blueprints. They built a gym that only the owner and the vice president could use, who we never met because they got to go in through another door. They built a gym for those two people, including a shower room. But they couldn't bother including lockers for the 200 people that were working for them.
Yeah, that's some fucked priorities. Locker rooms for our employees? Nah. Gym for us? Oh, hell yeah.
Yep.
It's our own private living quarters back here.
That was my first step toward losing respect for that company. There were many steps, but that was the first one.
Speaking of losing respect for people that you work for, again, I'm going to refrain from naming names of companies and peoples, but I will say this. I was supposed to get an update last Thursday or Friday for hours for the next weekend after this one. Still haven't gotten any. I'm assuming at this point, since no one wants to bother talking to me and no one else seems to know anything, I guess I'm done.
That's the older job, not the new one.
The older one, yes. The new one, actually, the new one just called me today and said that I'm off for tomorrow, even though I was originally on it. I'm thinking there's multiple reasons for this. One, I actually talked to the manager who does my schedules and mentioned the fact that I normally do closings over there at the old job. Number two, she did mention before I mentioned that they're going to be. I was asking about the 2 to 9 shift, which I'm going to have on Thursday. Yes, it is PM. I was worried for a hot minute, although I was pretty sure that our department doesn't start any earlier than 3 a.m. So that's why I just wanted to make sure. But also, they are possibly losing a bunch of college kids, which is why were already looking for somebody to do closing. So I'm thinking that might be part of it, that they might be just like hardball turning my training into just going into closing now. And number three, I am still like in my first month training, etc. So if anyone's going to be dropped off for accidentally having too many people on the floor, it'll probably be somebody like me. They'll just have somebody else from another department that's already there for stocking to come over to dairy and help continue the stock that they need to put up on Wednesday. Friday, I hear, is usually the really big, heavy days, and where an extra body would be looked at as, you know what, never mind, keep them. But yeah. Also, as far as I'm aware, with the new job, even if they do have me closing, I should be out of there by 9:30, which means I should be back home by 9:45 if I'm biking, or even sooner if other transportation is available.
Right. Alex, how has your week been?
Not too bad. I mean, the best thing that happened was that I might have finally gotten my mom to kick her alcohol habit. That was becoming an issue. So thankfully I seem to have finally gotten through to it and knocked that off.
That's good. That's a first step toward long-term stopping anyway.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I think the thing that finally worked was basically just saying, like, look, if you stop doing that, I'll try to cut down on the soft drink I have per day, because it was getting a bit much. Like, it's not as much as it used to be. I used to be a lot worse with it. But I was like, I could even tell, okay, this is getting bad. So I should probably rein it in. So
on one hand, contextually, I know that you mean cutting back on sugary drinks and probably drinking more water. But if I were to take that literally, like I'm going to stop drinking soft drinks, which means I'm going to pick up drinking more hard drinks.
Well,
you stop drinking the liquor, so I'll start.
Yeah. I mean, I doubt I would ever like cut soft drink out of my life entirely, but like I basically
this hard
have
water
it in my
doesn't
head
hit
now.
the same way.
Yeah, like I basically assume, well, like I'm basically under the thing now that I've basically decided on days I work where I'm probably gonna get some sort of fast food or whatever, that I'll probably get like Coke or something else with. Like days like that, I'm just gonna try to like not have any once I get home on days I work, and then like on days off, try to limit myself to like, because it's funny because I have like 600 not 600 ml bottles, I have 300 ml bottles. So I think that's what usually throws me off. If I had like 600 ml bottles, it'd probably be a bit easier to pace myself. But yeah,
Got you.
trying
Yeah,
to cut down on how much.
It's
In any
it's
case.
yeah, it's definitely working out a balance. Like at first, I mean, when I had the issue, like I was pretty much just either drinking like four. I would usually be drinking 4 Red Bulls or Monsters a day, and then I
Mm.
would be drinking because I was working in fast food. So then I would be drinking a
Mm.
Pepsi or a Dr. Pepper every 30 minutes. So for a while, I cut it completely.
Mm.
And then it was just pretty much only when I got pizza. And then I've kind of relaxed that to, okay, maybe I'll, especially since a lot of places, all they offer is either soda or they offer things that are just as bad as soda, just not carbonated. Uh, so I'm like, okay, if I'm out, sure. But I've got, like, at least I cut it enough to the point where if I'm sitting around at home, I usually don't have a desire for soda.
Mm.
Like the sweetest thing I usually like, especially in the summertime, I might have lemonade or iced tea at home, but it's usually not like, it's usually from a decent brand, relatively decent. There's still a lot of sugar in it, but it's not like, it's not as bad as
Mm.
like a Brisk or a Pepsi or a Coke.
Yeah.
So that way, since I don't have the desire for it most of the time, I don't feel as bad having it, even once a week because I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to drink water the rest of the week, so I don't.
Mm.
It doesn't feel like as much of a problem anymore.
Yeah.
Usually I
I mean,
max out on 2 cans of soda a day, and the rest is either water or my multivitamins
Mm.
that taste like Kool-Aid.
I
And
mean,
you've
I
been doing
know.
those the greens powder things, right?
Actually, I've been doing gamer sups mostly.
Mm.
It's a multivitamin. It is green tea based, so it does have some caffeine in it, but it's a more natural caffeine as opposed
Oh,
to the
so
processed
so is
garbage.
it like a what's the word? Like a fortified matcha sort of thing?
Matcha. Oh, is that the stuff that
A
you
powdered green tea?
kind of sorta? Yeah, the comes
Like I
with.
know you've mentioned some of it. I wasn't quite like you mentioned weird flavors and whatever is the main thing I had paid attention to.
Oh well, the current one I got. This is one of their more recent flavors that just got restocked again. Is um, red raspberry.
Ah.
You barely ever hear of the natural color raspberry, but they have made it. And it's delicious. And it's trying to turn my white cup pink.
Ah. So okay, so you say natural, but it's still mostly artificial food coloring
There's
then.
still a little bit of artificial food coloring to it. That'll help turn the watercolors and
Mhm.
the stuff like that. But it's still green tea based. It has a whole bunch of multivitamin stuff in it. Matter of fact, if I could just find where I put it, it's probably in the lunch pail here. Oh yeah. Let's have a look. See here again. What's all in here? We've got vitamin C, 100 milligrams. This is per scoop. Vitamin D3, 100 IU. I'm not sure what that is. Vitamin B6, 2.5 milligrams. Vitamin B12, 100 mcg. I'm not sure what that is either. Vitamin H.
Milligrams. Oh no, sorry. MCG? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Vitamin H, same. It's got, again, the natural caffeine in it.
So given that Alex's life update ended up with you reading a nutrition label, I think
Akiberry,
it's safe to
goji,
assume that we all
ginseng.
have ADHD. And
ADHD, and I also am dyslexic. That's why I can't remember names.
Hmm.
anything else going on with you, Alex, before we start reading more ingredient labels?
Multivitamin.
Not much. I mean, of course, it's annoying because like last week I was like, oh yeah, my shoulder seems to be fine, and then it started playing up again
Oh,
the other day, and all I can assume it's not playing it's not playing up as bad anywhere near as it was like a month or two ago. Um, so all I can think is like emptying some bins at work and then it getting like way colder for 2 days, like, is basically just the cold getting into it and making it worse.
Gotcha.
So I think that's about it. Yeah. Oh, and also apparently MCG just means micrograms.
Ah.
Because I decided
Oh,
to
I
look
guess
that up before I
because
filmed
normally
one.
micro you use the Greek letter mu, but I guess they decided that was not enough
Small.
people understood what that meant.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess that's up to me. And so next week I start classes at my new school. This past week I've mostly been uh, getting ready for the final exam and related things for the class I've been teaching. So as of now, I'm done with everything except for grading. Um, and it's been really interesting. I haven't talked about it much on here, but I've really liked that I've been able to just like take what knowledge I have of like streaming and YouTube. So I've been using OBS to record lectures. I haven't been like YouTube quality editing, but I've been, basically editing everything down to 15 to 20-minute videos without any long pauses, which
Right.
I figure is probably better for the students.
Keep it moving.
Um, yeah. And even though everything is pre-recorded lectures, there's still been a lot of back and forth via emails. So it's been a really interesting teaching in that way. So now, it's good to say that I've taught an asynchronous class. I also think just preparing uh, videos like that helps me to kind of refine my knowledge as somebody who's interested in being a future professor. So what I'm really thinking of is if I have time throughout the year to just keep making like 15-minute videos on things that I want to teach about, so that so I have lectures prepared when I'm actually teaching classes in them. Of
Hmm.
course, I do kind of want to go back into producing regular YouTube videos that kind of mix like psychology and pop culture. But I've been saying that for years, and who knows if it's ever going to happen. So it's one step at a time, right? Uh, but
Hmm.
getting more used to OBS has been really helpful in that I require a lot less editing than I did when I was just recording myself and then adding footage later. So that's nice. I
Hmm.
will say teaching stats using OBS is a nightmare because there's no way to set up your hotkeys in a way that you're not accidentally hitting something at some point that you need.
Hmm.
So I've turned off my recordings halfway through and not noticed for 10 minutes and things like that, which you can do with when I have two monitors, I can do it without hotkeys. But when I'm only using one monitor, you pretty much need hotkeys for OBS to not be a nightmare.
Hmm.
So yeah, that has also been an interesting experience over the past couple months. But now I am done with teaching for at least the next year. But I'm starting at a new school and really focusing on other stuff.
Hmm.
That is it for my update. So now we go on to tonight's show. We've got our birthdays and news. We do have some geek talk. And then we have Alex is giving our episode summary. And then we have our review and final thoughts. No ratings because this is part 3 of, I believe it's a 6-parter. I probably have that in a
I think
Windows.
it's
I
5-parter.
always close it. I never leave it open, not
hmm.
once. I
Part
always
3 of
close the
5.
tab.
Yeah, 5.
Okay.
It's just that the length of some of these make it about the length of a 6 or 7-parter.
Yeah, because the episodes keep fluxing.
Well, it's
Yeah.
also the fact that like if I look on TARDIS, it's split into 13 parts. So that doesn't like it's not like I can look at it and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, there's 5 parts." It's part
Hmm.
1, part 2, part 1, part 2, part 2, part 3,
Yeah.
part 2, part 3, part 3, part 1, part 3, part 2, it's so on. So it doesn't stick in the memory the same way.
Hmm.
So starting with our birthdays.
Yep. On the 9th of August, we have Roberta Tovey, who was Susan in Doctor Who and the Daleks turned 70. We have a few birthdays on the 10th. First, we have Kate O'Mara, who was the Rani in seasons 22 and 24, and is still to date the only person to play the Rani, at least in live action. Would have been 84, but died in 2014 at the age of 74. Next, on the 10th, we have Murray Melvin, who played Billis Manger in Torchwood Series 1. Would have been 91, but died in 2023 at the age of 90. We also have Clive Doig. I have no clue if I pronounced that correctly, but, you know, it is an unusual surname.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Doig. I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah.
It's probably like Welsh or Celtic.
Probably.
Yeah, but he was the vision mixer, which I guess for those who are curious, that would in the US they would call him a technical director. From An Unearthly Child through to The Chase, turned 83. And the final one for the 10th, we have Ron Grainer, the original title music's composer. Would have been 101, but died in 1981 at the age of 58. And finally, on the 11th, we have John Nathan Turner, the producer of seasons 18 through 26, aka the longest serving producer slash showrunner in the show's entire history.
For now.
Yeah. To be fair, the longest in one stretch. And also, I don't think RTD is really going to last that long.
I mean,
this second time around.
RTD only needs to film one more season to have an equal record.
Oh, wow.
And he's already doing a special and a season, so put up your dukes.
He's technically filmed 7 years worth of Doctor Who, which only really counts as 5 seasons because wibbledy wobbledy. But yeah, they compete, is what I'm saying.
So yeah, if you count like one continuous stretch, then JNT wins because. But in any case, he would have been 76, but died in 2002 at the age of 54. So happy birthday to Roberta, Kate, Murray, Clive, Ron, and John.
While putting the birthdays together, one thing that occurred to me is there's currently at least 3 living actresses who have played a version of Susan in live action. It would be really interesting if they ever did something with that in a televised story.
Or a
I
special
don't
or
think
something,
they
yeah.
will. Right, like there's I don't remember her name, and if I look it up, it's going to slow us down. But the one who played Carol Ann Ford in Adventures in Space and Time, Carol Ann Ford herself, and then Roberta Tovey in the middle, have all played different versions of Susan in live action. So it would be really interesting if they played 3 incarnations of Susan in a special, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
Because the BBC gets sent on it. Actually, Russell, you're in control now. Do something.
The most I could see is like Big Finish having a realization, and doing something with it because they're more likely to capitalize on that.
True.
I mean, the
Big
people
Finish is
involved
already
would also
working
have
with
to
2
be
of the 3.
right. So yeah, it would basically be the third would have to be willing to do it if they're not just retired outright at this point.
They have to recanonize her into a new Susan. Because technically hers is not canon because of the weird way they treated the movies.
Right. All right. Moving on to our regular news. We've got 2 pieces. And I'm a little surprised that nobody reminded me of this. I forgot to put together our Big Finish. So I'll be checking into that after giving the news.
I just thought there was no
Um,
big finish, which is rare, but it happens.
right. It's possible. So first off is the Underwater Menace animated Blu-ray release, which I was going to send the two of you the trailer, but it's a 30-second trailer and 20 seconds of it is the end tag saying to remember to subscribe. So there's not much there. But
No.
Alex, I think, had pointed out that 2 episodes are missing, but they animated all 4. And actually, it does say that here on the DoctorWhoNews.net press release. So the Underwater Menace Blu-ray will have both black and white and color versions of the original story, as well as having reconstructions of episode 1 and 4 and the original versions of episodes 2 and 3. So yeah, it looks like decent features. Again, I need to see if I can play Blu-rays, because looking at some of the features on these, it makes me consider starting a Blu-ray collection.
I need to look into that Blu-ray player. I want to get my PC.
Yeah, my main takeaway from this is that from what I can remember, both in the trailer and seeing stills of it, is that they've redesigned the sea people. I forget what the hell they were called, but or I guess just Atlantean, like the the people who who have to live submerged in water,
Right.
And like on one case, I'm like, oh well, this looks better. But also, if you're someone like me who's gonna want to watch, only really care about the animated reconstructions of the actual missing episodes, that's gonna be really jarring.
I think that's why they've been animating whole serials, because it kind
Probably.
of seems like as time goes on, they take, and maybe this is just whatever studio they've been getting, because it was different studios for a while, but they've been taking more liberties as time goes on with the visuals. Basically kind of just taking the script and almost doing their own thing with many scenes. So yeah, I could definitely see that grinding on some people. I guess that's why they don't want to force you to just watch an animated episode, watch a live action, and then back when there's so many changes.
And yeah, it's so bizarre that like this is notoriously cheap bastards BBC being like, sure, we'll fork out the money for you to reanimate
all of it.
all of this. When this is the Underwater Menace, which we were like lukewarm on at best. That like we kind of wanted to see an animated reconstruction, but I think even back then we were like, they're only gonna do 1 and 4.
If I
right?
remember right, this is the first destruction of Atlantis that was later retconned by another destruction of Atlantis. So it's not like it's
and
held in high regard by by the people, at least by the production teams that followed.
Yeah, like they give like 3 different explanations over the course of 2 Doctors in a row, so it's very confusing. But
yeah, the third Doctor couldn't make up his mind as to what actually went on with Atlantis.
Different timelines.
Wobbledy wobbledy.
But yeah, it will be interesting to see like the finished thing when it comes out. But also just it is just so bizarre that of all the stories, this is the one they pick. I mean, they did it with Galaxy 4 as well, now that I think about it, but I flatly refused to watch the animated reconstruction of the surviving episode because I was and seemingly it was a benefit because there's some really good acting moments in that would have been lost.
Galaxy 4 is the one we were talking about where like the animation made them all into clones of each other, while in the live action they were clearly distinct actresses that were not not siblings.
Yeah. Although that was a choice that I remember liking. But it was like, yeah, it's inconsistent with the live action, but it also makes more sense. because it's like, well,
Yin and yang.
you've got the thing to do that, so yeah.
I
And there's
understand trying to make them look more alike, but at the same time, having more distinct acting between them would help you differentiate which one you're watching.
Yeah, but it is also just weird that they could have just saved time and money. I mean, I'm still of the position that, like, I could get it if if it's a serial where everything's gone and we don't have any episodes remaining. But if it's stuff like we're only animating 1 or we're only animating 2, or there's just any surviving and this is black and white, why make a color version at all? Because that's just extra money that you're spending, and it's like...
Yeah, I'd rather just watch
No,
it even in animated in black and white.
I think I can answer that. And that is, people who are already hugely invested in Classic Who are probably going to want to watch the black and white. But if they're as time goes on, a smaller percentage of the audience will be willing to watch black and white stories. And I think they're still trying to get some of that audience to say, hey, you know, here's your color animated thing, to at least try to get them to watch. I honestly don't know from like a budgetary perspective if it's worth it, if they actually make enough sales to justify it. But I guess that's the thing.
To be fair, to make it black and white, it doesn't take a whole lot. We just put the entire film into an editor, just take away all the color with one toggle.
You're saying to make it go from color to black. I was going to say, to make it go from black and white to color probably takes a bit of effort. But going the other way, no.
The other way, no. No. I'm talking about taking color, going black and white. You just take one toggle down, pump it out as another video file, and you're done. Good day. Job's a good one.
I mean, that probably is what they do, and sometimes that doesn't work because there are colors that look distinct in color.
They probably do have to check
but look like shit when you put them in grayscale.
There are
that's why they.
As I was going to say, there are probably some things where you have to check scene to scene just to make sure the quality's still staying, but generally, for the most part, most of it usually works. I mean, that's honestly why I'm seeing one of the pictures here that Patrick Troughton and Jamie have white outlines is probably to help them pop from the background when it goes black and white.
Right. Okay.
They already thought ahead of it, and that's how you easily filter it.
Of course, it's going to be interesting to see when they get to something like the Daleks' Master Plan, which I'm pretty sure there are some surviving episodes of, or at least one.
There's like, I want to say there's like 4 episodes out of the 12 surviving.
Something like that.
Feels like something. That feels like something where it's that long that I'm curious if this, like, I'll just reanimate the whole thing is going to stick for that. Or if they're going to be like, no, that's 12 episodes long. Maybe just do the 8 missing.
I think I think they're taking their time on that one just because of all the missing episodes, that one is the one that's probably going to sell the most copies. So they don't want the animation to be cheap.
Yeah.
Because it's got word of mouth is going to spread fast.
Yeah,
so they probably want that to be.
Feels like they cut corners too hard.
It definitely wouldn't surprise me if that was like the last First Doctor thing to get reanimated.
And might I dare a suggestion here? They brought this down to only one studio that they're doing these recreations with, right?
I think so, at least recently. I think the past like 5 have had similar animations.
So if it's down to one studio, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they're having these guys work on that in the background while the majority of them are focused on making these shorter things done.
Right. They might have even been... Oh, actually, I think this is a studio that Big Finish bought. So I think that's why they've stuck with one. But I know some of the older ones had a more high quality animation.
Yeah,
But I don't know if there's an exclusive contract at this point or not.
hard to say.
Uh, Last thing on this is the press release says that this is available November 2023. That's British, I'm sure. So I look at Amazon and it has a placeholder date that's literally an extra 2 years out. Now that might be in case it gets delayed, or it might be because Amazon hasn't updated it yet. Which means that we probably will not have our US and Australia dates for probably until closer to the release or until it's actually released.
Yeah,
But one thing I
we'll
do
have them
see
no
on
sooner than
Amazon,
October for sure.
one thing I do see on Amazon that's interesting is they're offering both a Blu-ray and a DVD for pre-order. So it may be available both, not just the Blu-ray.
Well, to be fair,
Yeah, I think they've
DVDs
been-
actually still sell like hotcakes, at least in the United States.
I think they're still individual stories. They're still releasing on both. It's just the entire season collections
Yeah.
of classic stuff that are purely Blu-ray.
Oh, now I see it. So the title of the article just says animated Blu-ray, but then literally the tagline underneath it says animated on DVD and Blu-ray. So that answers the question right there.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next piece of news, Telos Publishing is celebrating 60 years of Doctor Who, with a bunch of new books. The first is The Illustrated Journey, a large format art book that celebrates the fiction of the show. So I'm guessing it's art inspired by different episodes.
Forward by Sophie Aldred.
Oh yes, forward by Sophie. Yep. It doesn't give. It gives a little bit of a blurb, but it doesn't say a whole much about it. Then there's the fanzine book, which looks like it's basically collecting fan publications from throughout the decades, 60s, 70s, 80s. So from at least the fan publications from at least the original version of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, it looks like, okay, so that one is, it says mailing at the end of August, so that's out now. The first one, The Illustrated Journey, is set September 2nd. So when it said, okay, so I'd kind of assumed this was all coming out in November. That's not the case.
Nope.
So if we have September 2nd, we have late August. The next one is November 2023, is Doctor Who Production Diary, The Hartnell Years by David Brunt. That's a day-by-day record of the show's production during the Hartnell years. Then in also the end of August is This Is a Fake by Andrew Mark Thompson, which that of course being a quote that we should know from City of Death. This is a full cover hardback presenting items ripped from an alternate dimension in a world where Doctor Who was different than how fans might have remembered. Okay, so this is an alternate universe Doctor Who collection book. I'm just looking at the blurb to see if there's something that kind of says why people would be interested in that. Okay, so it basically started that the author was kind of making this sort of stuff on Facebook and Twitter, making fake Doctor Who merchandise, using Photoshop, and then the doesn't say who how is. I'm guessing the publisher would say, hey, do you want to make this into a book? So it kind of almost became like a blog to book situation. So I guess if people enjoyed the Twitter and Facebook accounts about it, people will enjoy the book. Interesting.
That's for a particularly niche audience.
I mean, definitely if you're the person who wants, every, unique and interesting Doctor Who thing, you'll want to see this. As somebody who's a little more selective just due to budgetary reasons, I
Yeah.
don't think it's for me. But, I may have some interesting illustrations in there. And finally, skimming over to bigfinish.com/news, since I didn't look at this before. Let's see. No new releases actually in the past week, so all right. I guess
So
Matt's
never
Matt's
mind.
interpretation of the news was correct.
Never you mind.
All right, and then we move on to Geek Talk, starting with Mommy Dearest from 1981. We're really cutting the breaking news of movies.
Yeah. I mean, I forget how long ago I watched this. It would have been like while we were off, and like I've seen it once. Probably never watching it again. Is it a bad movie? Is it a bad movie? No, but the experience.
It's traumatizing.
Oh. Yeah, pretty much. Like I know this movie through seeing a lot of fellow queer people describe it as campy. And like the acting or something from the main lead actress in this being very campy, and I was just sitting there like anxiety spiking through the roof, and I'm just like, I got through the whole thing, but I was just like,
Whoever said this was
the impression I
campy had no emotions.
yeah.
Cause if nothing else, I know this movie for one reason: wire hangers.
Yeah. Like that, I knew of scenes from it because I'd seen like drag queens recreate bits or like make jokes of bits in this movie. But
That's how
so
they
I was thinking,
cope.
okay, so it's so like I was thinking, okay, so it's gonna be over the top to the point that you can't take it seriously. No.
No.
It is a lot of like, it's just traumatic, and like I'm like, anyone who thinks that acting is hammy and funny, like I want to know like that's a funny thing, because like I don't have any sort of that related to like my mom or anything, but I'm just sitting there like secondhand getting traumatized because this is like, holy shit, this is heavy. Like I even like afterwards was basically complaining about the movie to anyone who'd listen, that I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with people that they think that this is like, oh, I don't think I saw anyone saying it was fun, but I was saying that it was campy, and I'm like, Jesus, this is, this is one of those movies.
Methinks they're using the word, but they don't know what that word means.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, yeah. I mean,
Flash
the funny
Gordon
thing
is
like,
campy. It's very fun, but very
yeah,
campy.
yeah.
Mommy Dearest, I'm not sure
Yeah.
I would put in campy. I would definitely put in the trauma
Hmm.
section, though.
Yeah.
Because it
Like
literally is, from what I've seen in just clips, it's like watching someone's personal meltdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I felt very validated when like I brought it up in a specific Discord server I'm in, and like everyone that that responded was like, "Yeah, I exactly get where you're coming from." Because either they'd seen it or they knew about it and were like, "No, I'm never watching that." And it was like, "Yeah."
I respect
I
it,
kind
but
of
yeah,
wish I
I get
had
the
not
feeling
been
whenever I do see
misled.
it, it's going to be the one and only time I see it.
Yeah, like it's funny because it's like it's a good movie, but it is really one of those movies where like I wish I'd known what I was in for, and I'm never watching it again.
Oh, what's that movie
Because like
called?
that was a lot. Oh,
Oh.
like I even compared it to getting through Deliverance. It's
Deliverance, yeah,
is
kind of the same
the
bucket. I'm
quote.
trying to think of the one movie I saw from like the 90s that was very much the same way too. I can't remember the name of it. I know Jennifer Connelly was one of the main characters in it, and I can't remember what the name of it was right now. But yeah.
Yeah, I think without going in circles, that's about all I've got. I like a tentative recommend so long as you know what you're getting into, really.
I just remembered the title, Requiem of a Dream.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's also one
I
of those
don't
movies
think I
that I
know.
highly respect it. Watched it only once. That's the only time I'm ever going to watch that. Holy smokes. But yeah. Yeah, definitely one of those movies. And it's also on my list of something I need to see one of these days all the way through, but that's probably going to be the only time.
Yeah.
On a slightly
yeah, that's
less
a bad
dreary
marker.
note, Thief 3. So to catch up everyone on the franchise up to this point, we've had the original Thief game and the second one. They were made close enough together that they borrowed the same engine for the second one, but added extra bells and whistles. This is still the same people behind it, but this is like a totally different new engine. It was like at least a 5 or 6 year gap between games at this point too. But there was a big outcry for the Thief franchise to come back, and fans were always still anxiously waiting as they heard little tidbits here and there. And they also wanted a bit more of a comeback of some of the more supernatural elements from 1, which it does give us that. There's some really weird, outlandish stuff in here. Matter of fact, probably one of the more horrific scenes in all of the Thief games happens in this game when you're going through an asylum and you have to fight off a bunch of undead that are literally being, like, still shocked in their death. Like, they put them through the shock therapy, and as they're walking around with these things wrapped around their heads and stuff, they're still being shocked, and that's causing them to still activate an undeath. Thankfully, you can use things like flashbangs, and actually the flashbangs hurt them and will knock them out. And they'll stop shocking themselves. But long and the short of it, the first game was about a deity of evil trying to come into the world. Garrett is accidentally involved because the deity in human form basically asked him to find the stuff for him. And in the end, the secret organization called the Keepers, that one of their members originally taught him his thief skills, or at least helped him enhance them, show up at the last minute to help him take down the deity and give him the stuff he needs to vanquish the menace to the world, basically, in the final nutshell. The second game, the same group of keepers is still watching him and advises him that something is coming, but they won't give any more details than that, and he does take down a would-be cult of a previous enemy group called the Hamrites, but these were, like, I forget what they called themselves.
Did you say the hemorrhoids?
Hemorrhites. Hammerites.
Ah.
Their big symbol is a hammer.
Gotcha.
But the splinter group of the Hammerites, I forget what they called themselves, but they started basically doing like steampunk mechanism stuffs, and their leader was a very corrupt individual. So much so that some of the villains from the previous game actually turned into allies in the last act. And sacrificed themselves in order to help Garrett again achieve a victory against this enemy. And at the end of it all, though, he is because of the events of the first game, he's missing an eye. But towards the beginning of the second game and upgrading it by the end of the second game, he has a mechanical eye now, which allows him certain extra bits of skill here and there. In the third game, we still pick up. He's maybe a few months after the events of 2. And again, it's the same crew behind this, so they're still telling an interesting and well-woven story. But this time in particular, you start off the usual typical thieving, but it very quickly turns into you're coming in contact with the 2 previous groups, the Hammerites and the Woodsy folk, the people who almost brought in an evil deity. and you're kind of trying to balance the two to not go into a basically an all-out street brawl and murdering each other and every innocent in between. But as you're also doing this, you're starting to realize there's a thread going through and is starting to point at the keepers that there's something else going on, and you're not quite sure what it is until you hit that asylum. After that asylum, it basically blows everything out of the water, and suddenly you realize that there's a person amongst the keepers who's been secretly hiding themselves. What they actually are, what they at least look like now, is a giant hag. If you know the D&D hag, think that, only instead of just one like nasty witch-looking creature, it's like monstrously large like the Hulk and made out of multiple people, its previous victims. And she apparently was previously a keeper, but back when they lost their knowledge of what the keepers originally were. So she's been keeping a lot of secrets even the keepers don't know. And you're basically in a race to find the final magical rune in order to either allow her to stay what she is and further threaten all of humanity, or you manage to unlock the final rune and take her down. Guess which ending you get? And it ends the game going a nice full circle as all the secrets have been undone. Even the keeper's magic doesn't work anymore, and their once completely hidden in plain sight school of craftsmanship has suddenly been revealed before everybody in the city. And even Garrett's eye, which was replaced by the mechanical eye now for almost 2 whole games, is suddenly back. Because one of the items was the first item that they stole his eye for in the first game. So he physically, through magical means, has gotten his eye back. But as he's walking the streets, a very similar scene plays out, because at the very beginning of Thief 1, young Garrett tries to pickpocket a keeper, and that's when the keeper decides to pick him up and teach him how to be a real thief. As Garrett's walking through the streets, a young girl suddenly is trying to reach into his pockets, to which he grabs her by the wrist and tells her, "You have unusual skills, because it's very hard to see a keeper, especially one that does not wish to be seen," as a smile spreads across his face, and that's the end credits. Using the exact words of the keeper that found him. Sadly, the 4th game, which I am working on, does not follow up with any further plots. As a matter of fact, it takes place 1,000 years after 3. So basically, any continuation has gone out the window. They do make some mentions to the Keepers, the Hammerites, and the Woodsy folk. And there's even a bit of info on the original Garrett if you go into a prison and find his mechanical eye. But that's all the further it really gets to being tied to the original Thief. The 3rd one's basically the big final act. There's a lot of bugs with it, sadly, due to the weird early 2000s age of the game. But there's already like a huge fan-made patch for the thing that gets rid of like half the load screens and all this other stuff. So it's a much more playable game than what it was when it came out. And honestly, I had a lot of fun with it. It's also fun to sometimes just watch the AI go crazy, because as the AI is walking through the levels you're going through, certain ones have certain alliances and absolute hatreds literally walking the same map as them. So you'll suddenly see a bunch of cutthroats suddenly throw down in the middle of the street with a bunch of guards. And you're just watching from the bushes as you're just watching people brandishing blades and just downing each other. It's kind of fun once in a while. But yeah, otherwise, really fun game, really decent story. I've only given you like the highlights of the story. There's a lot more stuff going on in between all those major steps. And they also picked a very similar animation style for the cutscenes that they did in the first 2 games as well. So it's nice that they stuck to their guns on how the look and feel of the game is supposed to be. And I guess I'll give information on the final and 4th one so far, at least. When I get done with that, I'm like 4 or 5 hours into the 4th one now. Actually, yeah, something like that. But yeah, I generally quite enjoyed it. That's about it.
All right, so that's the end of our geek talk, which brings us to our episode summary.
Which should probably be very brief.
All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, we open on the minister and Senator Sala trying to pull a ruse by pretending the minister has captured Sala, only for both to be taken into custody anyway. We then see that General Tanis treats the leader of his people, Premier Bedlow, as nothing more than a puppet, so he doesn't have to pretend to be benevolent to the populace, and has taken one of his children hostage to keep Bedlow in line. After dealing with Sala getting tortured in an attempt to get information from her, the minister blackmails Captain Khan into getting him near a computer terminal, which the minister manages to mess with verbally somehow before going back to Senator Sala and helping her escape. Or at least they start to make an escape. We're not sure if they actually did or not, but I'm assuming they probably did. The Doctor and Antimony then land on Alpha Canis, home of the Canesian Empire, or Canisian, however you want to pronounce it, and probably get arrested when the Doctor claims at a computer terminal that they've kidnapped Bedlow's children. Eventually meeting with Bedlow personally and convincing him to let the Doctor and Antimony go and save the child that Tanis kidnapped to remove the leverage Tanis has over Bedlow, with the intention of taking Tanis down after that. Now, all throughout this as well, we've been having shots back and forth to Ace and Casmus discussing life, the universe, and everything. And we then go to, which is also in the cut at one point, with the Doctor and Antimony setting fire to the building, disguised as Canesian guards, sneaking in and snatching the baby that Tanis was holding Bedlow's child in, escaping the burning building and getting back to Bedlow, only for Tanis to appear and hold them at gunpoint, and that's the end.
All right, 2 minutes, 5 seconds.
Yeah, there was like, I re-listening to it, I'm like,
There's
you know,
lots
a
of
lot
little
of this is
fine
just
details going on, but that's in broad
a lot
strokes.
of,
Yeah, it's very quick.
yeah, like certain things I'm like, oh, this is just character stuff. I don't
Mhm.
really need to for a story summary. It's why I like offhandedly mention the Ace and Casmus stuff, because I'm like,
It's more little
really
character
plot
tidbits for
relevant
Ace,
that
but
we
that's
know?
about it.
But I also didn't want to skip it.
The most relevant part of that was basically him saying, "Oh yeah, you have to live outside of time, like outside of society, because of your understanding of time, and therefore you can't like interact and have a family and whatever."
Which I say, that's Bubkiss. If she ends up having a TARDIS of her own, she's gonna be able to do whatever she wants with it, but to each their own. It almost felt very Star Wars Jedi-ish of them.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how the Time Lords in this story just are.
Yeah.
Now that you say that. All right. What did we like about this story? Starting with, let me check my notes, Matt.
General thing I liked about the story.
Yep.
I liked that they focused on what's his name now? This other Time Lord?
The Minister.
The Minister. I keep forgetting his name for some reason. I like that they focused on the Minister and finally gave him some proper time, because they've all been obviously hinting that these other groups have something important to the story going on, but it's kind of annoying just to keep having them guest appear but not really seemingly progress. This definitely showed a lot of progress, and they even still managed to squeeze in a little time with the Doctor to have him in a relatively short bit of highlight notes get through something as well.
Yeah, the leader of the Resistance, who the Minister was with, she doesn't even have her own TARDIS page. So I was wondering if we were ever going to see her again. So when she showed up in this episode, I was like, yay, she actually has a purpose.
Woo!
Anything else to say on that?
That's generally my general opinion of this episode. It's just nice to have one of the side stories take in and get something done.
Okay. Hopefully next episode, Ace will
I'm
do
hoping one
something
next episode
as well.
Hmm.
All right, Alex?
I guess on a sort of related note, I kind of like the villain dynamics that we got in this that they introduced, because now we've got, like, you know, there's a stuff with the minister trying to essentially turn two of those guys against each other. We're like, oh, you'll get a promotion if you successfully do this, and blah 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 blah. And also just the whole thing of Tanis keeping one of the leaders' children hostage to be like, you know, I technically run this shit, because if I wanted, I could basically just, you know, it would not take very much for me to do a coup. So, but I also don't want that position, because then I'd have to pretend to be nice. Like that. So those dynamics of, like, you know, these are clearly still horrible people, but they feel more like people as opposed to characters now.
Yeah,
There are more
they felt
dynamics
a little more
involved.
cut outish evil than they do now, because now there's actually
Yeah.
grounding for how they're getting away with what they're doing.
And that's something you can do in a almost 3-hour story.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say what I liked is how they managed to use the predictability of the cartoonishly evil against them. So for example, what I mean, like, the minister was able to realize, oh, they're operating on Star Trek Mirror Universe rules, like, right? They're always trying to take their boss's position and have their boss killed, use that against them in order to get what I need. And it was doing the same thing where he's just like, well, you know, obviously this guy is, you know, cartoonishly evil. He's going to go whatever length. I wonder if he's holding the other guy's kids hostage. Does he have kids? Oh, yes, he does. That's exactly what he's doing. Like, they're able to, you know, to take the extremes of the bad guys and be like, okay, here's why, you know, crime doesn't pay, kids. In a believable way, and not a public service announcement way.
Right.
All right. What do we dislike about the episode with Matt?
What I generally disliked about the episode, it really feels like the stuff with Ace is dragging on and going, like, almost nowhere. They do drop the idea that she's going to go into a test next time, and that she's going to go into a cave, which is why I do hope that there's at least a little more time spent with her next round, and that hopefully something gets done in that amount of time. But man, are they really dragging on?
Yeah. It feels like
that's just what hit me, like, hard in this in particular scenes. It's just like,
It almost feels like the nature of splitting it into episodes like this is hurting it, because if it were fully serialized like a classic Doctor Who story, then they would be like, okay, you know, have all 3 plot lines running concurrently. But instead it feels like they're like, okay, in this episode we're really going to focus on the Doctor and the vampires, and then in this other episode we've got the prisoner plot and the keeping the kid hostage plot, and we really want to finish those within the episode before we get to the next episode. So
but
there's
we still
not
want
really
to drop
the
more
time.
feelers for the next episode, because we still want to advance some stuff with that character.
Right. Well, and it's also, they don't want us to think that we forgot about the character. Yeah. But yeah, it's if next episode is not the episode where we really get enough time with Ace to know why, what's going on with her plot, then that'll be a huge dropped ball and that'll reflect poorly on the overall rating, because we've now had 3 episodes of, by the way, Ace is there, something's going to happen. And it hasn't, we've gotten a little bit of progress, but not much.
The next episode, it better be like a more like at least half or more of the fifth episode.
We're at the midway of the story. We're at the midway of the story, and one of the 3 main plots has not gotten anywhere yet. So that's why I say it really should be next episode, or the rating, my rating at least, will suffer.
Yeah, it needs to kick into high gear fast.
Like, I can forgive it as long as she is the main focus and gets at least 10 minutes of next episode story.
Yeah,
and it's a meaningful 10 minutes, and not just 10 minutes about the philosophy of time.
Yeah, like, especially given that, like, this episode was basically a half hour, but the next one has, like, an extra 8 minutes. So it's like, you would hope that those extra 8 minutes, at least...
She should get
focus on her,
she should get at least between 10 and 15 minutes of next episode. Yeah. I would almost argue 20 minutes, but that might be with 3 plot lines going on, and the fact that this seems to be the less important one, that might be a little too much. But really, she should be at least half of the episode, because she's been gotten so little time up until now.
Yeah, I would definitely say you could get away if they did do that. You could get away with focusing more on like the Ace plot and the Minister plot, because. Well, actually, I feel like for the moment you could argue that the Minister one's sort of resolved, but you could have them still like, we don't know if they're out yet, so the next episode.
Well, I believe technically they're out because these guys were getting assassinated, or the fact that they escaped.
Oh yeah, right. And the Ace plot still hasn't gone anywhere yet. Whereas, if you like, if we don't have the Doctor and Tanis plot in the next episode, I'd be fine with that, because it's left on a cliffhanger that you could draw out, because that keeps people interested to be like, well, what the hell's going on with that plot line? Because like that feels like it's getting to one that would be a like, the next time we revisit them, it's probably gonna be like the finale of that bit of that plot thread. Potentially, depending. So if they basically held off on that, or just made it like less important in the next episode, I'd be fine with that. Especially because, like, it does seem so bizarre that, we still don't know who Antimony is, why he's, which I guess that'll honestly, you know what, that's mine right now. Like, is who the fuck is Antimony and why am I supposed to care? Like, I like him,
he's a companion,
I technically already know, but I spoiled it for myself by accident.
So you don't think just being the Doctor's new companion is enough? You're like, we really need the story on this guy.
Like, given he apparently knows Ace, and like, but we've never met him before. I don't think he's shown up in, like, he obviously never showed up in the show. I don't know if he's from any books or anything.
He's not. I looked it up because I thought he would be, because Ace is traveling without the Doctor, it seems. So I thought maybe they were continuing on from the books, but not as far as I can tell.
Yeah, because like the idea seems to be that like Ace was traveling with the Doctor, but they got separated, and
it's almost kind of unclear.
Well, I think it's like,
other than the fact that the Doctor doesn't seem worried, even though Ace has been
like
gallivanting among time and space for 3 episodes.
Yeah, she was seemingly saved from one of these like villainous groups' ships. So the implication to me is that she was probably trying to do a distraction of some kind.
Mhm.
But it's also like, okay, so was she traveling with him or not? But in any case, like, yeah, it's like with Antimony, it's like, I don't know who this is.
Mhm.
I don't. The plot has not revealed what he is yet, but I'm aware, even because I accidentally spoiled it for myself. I forget how, but it just like ended up spoiling it for myself, and it's just like, who in the hell is like it? It seems weird to have gone this long without an explanation. Especially given that this is a new character. We were just introduced to him in media res, and it's like, what? This feels like. I would almost say this feels like kind of Mel, but I'm assuming that in Trial of a Time Lord she got some kind of a. Like. We don't know how they met, but, she still kind of technically has an introduction. Whereas Antimony is just there. It's like, oh, this is Antimony. He's always been here. It's like, no, he hasn't. This is his first appearance. Why aren't we, like,
Wait a
explaining
minute.
who this is?
Who are you?
Yeah. It's like, I can get that we don't want to, like, waste 10 minutes, like, well, here's his backstory and blah, blah, blah. But it's also just feels weird
That
to just.
that said, there's something, because like I said, I looked up to see if he came from books or not for that question, and there's already something that you are implying is a spoiler, so I'm going to not talk about that. But it seems based on what I've read that there are gaps in his knowledge that don't seem to make sense, and I'm hoping that this story explains that, because otherwise it's really weird.
Yeah, because at the moment, I'm almost wondering if, like, the plan was, oh, he'll be this mysterious new element. And, like, for all we know, we might learn it by the end of this story and whatever, but I don't know how far they're going to go into this is where he comes from,
And
this is blah, 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 blah. But, like, it almost feels like they were initially trying to set it up as here's a character you know basically nothing about. And if this story does well, we'll do more with this character involved.
So here's, by my
Where
understanding, they were planning on dropping the Doctor entirely and doing more stories focusing on the Minister instead.
ah
Unless it was going to be the Minister in Antimony.
maybe
But actually, when you
um
mentioned, like, well, it's not a one-to-one. Like, you mentioned mystery, and that got me thinking in a different way that has nothing to do with mystery. Like, if Antimony is a super white bread character, he doesn't have a ton of like, there's interesting things about him. He's not complete trash, but he's not a very dynamic person. His personality is very minimal. But if he were a character like Lucy Miller or Joe is probably the best I could think of in the show proper, right? She has a very interesting personality. If somebody like Joe were introduced, we might not even care about the origin, because we're like, this is a really interesting character. We want to see more about how this character reacts to different situations and not even think about it. Antimony is not that guy.
yeah.
Yeah, he keeps mixing up literally history with current knowledge. Is
Well,
one
yeah,
of his
and I
biggest
mean,
issues.
yeah, that's probably the most interesting thing about him, is that he has textbook knowledge of Earth that he's probably gotten from listening to the Doctor ramble on. And that's really the most interesting thing about him, is that he doesn't know about Earth.
Something like what you described it.
Whereas, I mean, we've had companions that have never been to Earth before, so that's not new. He needs something else of his own.
Mm-hmm.
So then this comes to me next, and I didn't have any major story issues. The one thing that, and this was kind of my first impression of the episode, so maybe there are other things I would have picked if this wasn't so strong in my mind. But the audio mixing, especially in the beginning, bugged the hell out of me. Like, I could not tell what they were saying. So it's like, okay, even though YouTube automatic captions are not perfect, let me turn on the automatic captions and see if they can at least help me understand what is being said. And the automatic captions were like if someone put like auto text from your phone and Chat GPT and like a random word generator into a room together and told them to have a conversation. I shared in our chat this one where it's like, toilet title unsightly, to restore our delicious pork, was welcomed by cheering. I think 3 of those words were actually said out loud, and the rest was YouTube not knowing what they said and me also not knowing what they said. And thankfully it got better later on. Like, this was mainly
It's mainly that like opening
the
introduction.
ceremony thing, and they were
Yeah.
talking over like a loudspeaker or whatever.
And the echo was just so terrible.
Yeah, the echo and like the sound
The-
effects and the voices were super
background
soft.
cheering and the weird mechanical voice on top of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and I mean, maybe you would argue it would be just a scene, but yeah, the technicals of that, it just was driving me crazy. And at some point, I could understand them a lot better, and that's good because, you know, it's not like we can read their lips in a story like this. All right, favorite scenes, Matt.
Favorite scene. Honestly, I just love the minister pulling a doctor. Literally, outwitting the guards to get himself near the main computer so he could literally verbally somehow put a virus in it. Also, get the information that he needs to help save people, and also make good and sure on their ability to escape the facility. All in one go. Literally, the only thing missing from that scene was the fourth doctor replying back to the villains. And normally, as an encore, I win. Ducking out of the door.
I mean, if it was the fourth doctor, then in the first scene when he was captured, he would have offered them a jelly baby.
Should have. He
He's
really
like,
should have.
he's like, I propose to make a trade. Oh, we're gonna come out and get you. And would you like a jelly baby?
You have such wonderful soldiers here. They're so violent.
But yeah, the minister does feel very doctory there, and I'm of mixed mind about it because on one hand, yes, we're watching Doctor Who. This is the kind of thing that we like to see. On the other hand, I'm still waiting for what sets the minister apart as something other than a second-rate doctor.
Right.
And I'm sure, I hope we're going to get that. But at the moment, it's just Doctor 1 and Doctor 2. And
basically,
that can only get you so far, yeah.
Yeah. Which in its own right is kind of odd, because even the other Time Lords that we've met that are distinct enough that are like both versions of Romana are still her own person and not just the doctor with boobs. So it's like, you would think that,
and it's even Romana, like Romana 2 has been accused of just being the fourth Doctor, but but she definitely has unique personality traits that are not the Doctor's at all.
Yeah, she's a lot less manic than the fourth Doctor can get at times. For one.
And usually a lot less worried about what's going on.
Pending.
Oh yeah, pending. But she'll be like a lot more annoyed at being captured or something than like, oh no, help me. or something.
I was gonna say,
was-
I think there's situations where the doctor is just like, oh yeah, this sort of thing has happened to me at least once a week for the past 600 years, and she's like, what? No, we should not be in this situation.
Yeah. And like, and you would think that given the casting choice, they would just have him be a lot more witty and sort of dry compared to the Doctor.
Using the Minister, you're saying?
Yeah. Because it like just lean into Stephen Fry's strengths.
Especially since this is where it's basically it's dark coat Sylvester McCoy, so it's not like Patrick Troughton imitating Sylvester McCoy. It's the scheming, serious one. So having a more witty character like that would be a good foil. Did you have more to say on that line? Be that before I
No,
jumped
that
in?
was pretty much it.
Oh, I meant what Alex was saying about Stephen Fry, or was that all you were saying?
No, that was about it.
Okay. That was
Like,
still Matt's favorite scene, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So on to Alex.
Let's see. God, there's actually a few from this. I'll try and narrow it down. Honestly, you know what? Keeping it to the Minister, his reaction to Senator Sala being thrown back in the cell with him. Because at first he's being very, like, you know, very typical, you know, sort of half joking, not taking them seriously. And then he sees her having been brought back after being tortured and is just goes off. And is just like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Effectively. And just the way that that's acted as well, that it's like, it's the angriest he is in this entire thing.
Yeah, it was such a turn that for a second I was like, is that another character? No, it's the same character.
Because it's like, you know, clearly this is a Time Lord who is like, oh, these bloody plebeians, they're not going to be able to outsmart me, and haha, this is going to go as planned. Not realizing that, no, they're fascist pricks. They are probably going to torture both you and her, but they're definitely going to torture her. And now he's realizing, because to me, it's like that's when it clicks for him. That's like, oh, yeah, I can't underestimate how evil these people are.
Right.
I
did kind of get a chuckle out of that when Sala was like, "Don't be a woman." I was like,
yeah, that was a bit
you're a
weird.
woman."
Yeah, that was a bit weird, but it was very and I guess that's a scene that I feel like the Doctor wouldn't necessarily have had. Yeah, he would have been pissed that that had happened, but I feel like it would have been a lot more understated because he's used to it. He would have cursed him out, but he probably wouldn't have been that angry, or at least the anger would have been more seething than
if it was 7. Yes,
this outburst. Yeah.
If it was 9, he
because-
would have gone on a rant against lesser species.
Yeah.
I think 4 might have done the same thing.
Because it's to me it comes off as very, this is the first time this Time Lord has had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Like that kind of a consequence to this kind of action. And he's like, what the, so yeah, that's why it comes off as like, so what the fuck is wrong with you? And probably why Sala is so, yeah, I kind of expected this was gonna happen, but I'm stronger than that, so I put up with it. Whereas, yeah, this is a, you know, a privileged Time Lord who's never had to deal with this crap before, and is, you know, so taken aback by it that he's just so blood-curdlingly angry.
It's
And
like
it's like,
the minister is the kind of character who wouldn't even expect what I assumed would happen. Is okay, we've got the two of them here now. Execute them both on the spot. Because like it seemed like they're the kind of bloodthirsty army that they would do that, and they're like, okay, your
yeah.
plan doesn't really get you anywhere if that's the choice they take. But I don't think he even considered that could happen.
Right. Plus, also, he's probably taking into it. He's probably just coming at it from the Time Lord perspective of, oh well, if they shoot me, I'm just gonna pop up again in a couple of minutes.
True.
So, um, so even if she dies, I'm fine. But then he sees that they've tortured her for info, and he's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you people? So uncivilized," kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And yeah, again, she's just like, "Yeah, I expected that." So, and like, I'm the one it happened to. Why are you so pissed?
No.
But yeah, it was definitely the standout scene for the minister for me.
Mm.
So for me, I think I'm going to go with the scene early on between Tanis and Bedlow, where Tanis is just like, "Oh yeah, you thought you were my collaborator, just whitewashing my deeds. Actually, I'm in charge here. I'm taking over." It was just so like he was. I mean, obviously the actor's face wasn't on the screen, so you couldn't judge that. But it felt like he had such joy in the scene. He was just eating up the moment,
You
and it
feel the
was just
smug
contagious. To be
villainy.
like, it's like you're not cheering for. It's like the character you love to hate moment. You're not
Mm-hmm.
you're not cheering for him, but you're just like you're
Yes,
almost
give us
reveling
more
in the
reasons to
escalation of
despise
things.
you right now. Yes,
Hmm.
please. Let me soak it in.
And there's also the fact that like this is the first scene we've gotten with Bedlow, so like we don't necessarily feel bad for him. Clearly, they've been working together all this time, but he's a convenient person to become the target of all of this going on.
Mm-hmm.
No.
All right, least favorite scenes, Matt.
Least favorite scene. Oh gosh, what was it now? Just I can't even remember what was even being said. I just remember early on, um, we were going from one scene, and then all of a sudden we fade to black, and then we just come back to a scene with Ace, and it's literally just a really pointless dialogue-heavy scene between her and the other guy, and it just as abruptly as it comes in from nowhere, it just ends and goes back to what we were previously about. It's like, okay, what was even the point of that? It didn't even add anything to what would come in later in this episode, much less what's going to happen later on, as far as I'm aware. Just like, what? Okay, whatever.
I I literally only remember one scene with Ace, even though I'm sure there was more than one.
Yeah, I think there was technically like
There's like 3 or 4 of them before the more important later ones.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think there was at
Like
least
I'm,
two, and then there's the
I,
one near the end that like intercuts with them getting the kid.
I only really remember the "oh yeah, you're never going to have a grandkid" conversation.
Mm,
Like that's the only scene I
That
remember.
was the
yeah.
last one before the stargazing one, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm,
Or actually, no, that might have been the same one, actually.
And I think it was the same one.
Yeah, she was gazing up at the stars as the fight was supposedly ensuing, and they kind of gradually get to the point of, yeah, you're never really gonna have a family. You can't really do that if you're gonna be doing this kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, you get to go to the cave tomorrow. Good luck. Good night.
mm.
We're gonna take you to the cave under the tree on Dagobah, where you can meet Darth Vader.
Cave of mystical wonders.
So that's it for your least favorite scene.
That's about it. Yeah, just a couple
Okay.
times they just did that. It's like, what? Okay, moving on.
All right, Alex.
uh, ooh. Let's see. Hard to think of any, really. Because, yeah, a lot of it is just like the Ace and Casma stuff I don't hate, but aside from the.
There
Aside
was a
from
scene
the
that touched on something
thingo.
you disliked last week, and I was wondering if you caught it.
Probably
It
just
was a
blanking on it off the top of my
it
head.
was it was a scene that I know Rand would have gone on a would have hated, but
Oh.
I probably forgot. I must have forgot about it now. Oh, right, yeah. I guess to follow on from the thing that I brought up last time, um, there's a bit where the doctor claims to have never been a baby.
Oh.
yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, and again, that's a thing where with the explanation you gave last week, where it's like, well, it could just literally mean this incarnation and not the Doctor as a whole. But like,
Yeah, I took
in
that as a Looms reference myself.
mm,
I think that was a long
um,
borrow
Yeah,
reference.
which
even
is
though it's
which,
technically still not canon, that's still them.
Yeah.
I feel making that reference.
which I
It's
mean,
like,
I
If
will
anything,
say,
Longbarrow is more canon than this, which is to say, not a
not
very high
canon
bar.
at all.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if if Looms were canon, like I wouldn't have an issue with it. But I guess just everything since has basically said no, they're not.
Yeah.
Which the only reason I have a problem with them not is because that would at least make them more alien.
Mm-hmm.
At least, you know, rather than just, oh, they reproduce the same way humans do. Well, that's boring. They're aliens. Make them do alien shit.
I still say
Um,
that, and that one short before Day of the Doctor really seemed as though there was a freshly loomed soldier, and they were like, "Oh yeah, well, welcome to life. You're gonna fight now." But I know not everybody agrees with that interpretation.
mm, um, uh, but yeah, it's just such a. Given that it's never followed up on, it just has this weird. It's just like such a bizarre line that it's just like, you know, again, if it is a matter of just purely this doctor saying that the seventh doctor was never a kid or a baby, or just young in general, it's like, okay, fine. But if the implication is more the doctor has never been a kid, um, which I feel like it wasn't even with the Looms, they don't come out as full grown adults, they still just come out as kids. Just maybe that they skip being a baby in that. I
So
forget.
if you're taking Longbarrow literally, they do come out as adults because there's a mention that everything in the house was double sized so that they could have the experience of being kids despite being in adult bodies. That's probably the weirdest part about that whole concept. And that, like, obviously, New Who has very much been like, no, here's a Time Lord as a child. So at the very least, that's not what we're going with. But we never
Yeah.
actually see a Time Lord being born, so.
Which is one of those funny things because that still makes it ambiguous as well. Maybe someone could do that if they wanted. They'd have to change how it works from that book, but yeah, it's just such a, especially yeah, like it's just such an off the cuff line that it's like, yeah,
Boy.
it's weird to interpret.
Mhm.
All right. On to my least favorite scene, and that. Oh yes. So I'm going to say the scene in the cells, with the minister and Sala, and there's a few reasons for it. One is that from a technical perspective, there were times when I was really confused. It happened so quickly after the previous scene that I at first didn't realize time was meant to have passed until they talked about the torture. Second, as I mentioned, there were multiple times when I thought there was a third person in the cell, and that's a combination of the very minimalistic animation, the way they edited it, and then the voice is changing a little bit too much to keep track of from time to time.
Yeah, I did
Uh,
notice that every once in a while the audio for
mhm.
these things does suddenly change quality between takes.
Right. Separating that from the story reason, it's just super convenient. So you have this guy who allegedly was bringing over this person. So, if anything, you'd want to keep him separate from Sala to understand what his motivation was and all of that. Two, you don't want to put your enemies together so they can conspire against you. Three, the fact that if they were going to execute him, why would they keep them together into, like, he's not even a valuable prisoner for public execution, so it's just overly convenient why they would just put him and Solid together, other than the fact that the plot needed them to be near each other to be able to talk.
Right.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
By extension to that, it's weird that they tortured her for info, but not him to figure out who he is.
Hmm.
Like, even in friggin' Dalek, what's his face tortures the doctor for info and to, like, figure out what he is and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird that in this, they're like, we don't know who you are. Well, you're clearly for them, but since you're an unknown entity to us, we should probably torture you as well because we're evil fascists, so why not? But also to figure out who he is, and you could even have it be that like, oh well, he's a Time Lord, and the method of torture that they tried doesn't do anything, or just they figure out, they figure out very quickly, oh, this guy ain't gonna break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anything, they're like, well, you're clearly an unknown entity from another planet who has come to interfere with our invasion. Clearly, you have no useful information, and we should just kill you.
Yeah.
But at least the one person who knows he's a Time Lord eventually gets involved in the decision making processes. But before that, it's weird that they care so little about him.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to final thoughts.
All right. Final thoughts for this episode. I definitely like it. I definitely like where they're going so far with the new Time Lord antagonist. Keep forgetting his name.
The minister.
The minister. I'm liking where they're going with him. I just hope that that he gets a little more fleshed out and we can see some decent differences between him and the Doctor. But the fact that they never did the spin-off that they were thinking of doing with him kind of tells me that probably is not going to happen. But it's been interesting nonetheless, and I do hope we at least get a little bit of catch up with the Doctor next episode to continue the cliffhanger that we were left on, because that's a heck of a cliffhanger. Pretty solid episode so far. It's going in a good direction so far. Really hope something happens with Ace really dang soon. That's
Anything else? All right, Alex.
Yeah, this is a thing of like, I'm enjoying this the more it goes, but also it's like, we've only got 2 parts left, and there are like at least 3 different threads going, which I guess thankfully there aren't any more than that.
Yeah.
So they're smart enough to at least keep it
simple,
contained. Stupid. Yeah. But it is a weird thing that like, we're 3 episodes in, the Ace stuff has basically gone nowhere. Aside from just, yep, she's still here. And I mean, like, again, I'm glad that we've moved forward the stuff with the minister, because otherwise in the previous 2 it felt like he was just kind of there. So now he's had his episode where he's got a bit more to do, so have to hope that the next episode is when Ace gets a bit more to do. Or at least just generally we further that plot. Because honestly, if they even just used the next episode to just finish her plot, I wouldn't mind. Because it's such a side thing that feels like it would. I don't know if it'd be better off as its own thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like it just so far there is like I'm waiting for there to be like a twist in it or something that's going to bring it back to what is otherwise going on. And there's stuff from like the first episode that I don't think has come back up since. Like they were meeting at a place and it was like, oh hey, shit's going weird and stuff, and you know that I don't think has come back since. The vampire thing was very self-contained, I guess, because nothing about that's come up again yet. Earth hasn't come up again yet either, because like the cliffhanger for the last time was, oh hey, Earth is a nice place to invade. That hasn't come up again yet, so hopefully that comes back in next episode.
I kind of was wondering if that was just gonna be like, oh, in the final episode this is gonna happen, or if it would be sooner than that.
I guess knowing at least one casting in this, I'm assuming it's happening at some point. Just it's just a matter of when. But yeah, I'm tentatively hoping that the Ace stuff actually goes anywhere. But otherwise I'm looking forward to how we resolve all this in the next 2 episodes. So yeah, we'll see where we go. But I'm definitely still, they haven't lost me yet. Like I went from being very ambivalent after after part 1, and now after part 2 and 3 it's like, okay, you've hooked me. They would have to fail pretty spectacularly in the in the next part for me to just go back to being ambivalent. But that's about it.
First off, I keep thinking there's 3 more parts to this. I need to remember that there's only 2 more parts, which is all the more reason why Ace really needs to be much heavier in the next 2 episodes for her involvement to be relevant. That said, one thought that I forgot to mention earlier on of what I do like about this story is that the 2 main plots we really focus on are a lot more tied together than before. So the whole point of the previous episode from the Doctor's perspective is, hey, someone just told Tannis that Earth exists. Okay. That really, it is not worth an episode other than the fact that the episode was entertaining. If the episode was a little less entertaining, it would be a waste. This episode, probably not. Well, it's kind of hitting its stride, but it's they're a lot more tied in, right? Both plots involve Tannis and his men. They're kind of intertwined. They have some themes in common, so they fit together much better than any subplots we've gotten so far in this story. Again, the Ace is a glaring exception, and hopefully that's going to be rectified soon. But I've spoken enough on that I don't need to keep harping on it. Otherwise, I think every other thought that I have about this episode has been mentioned already. So I guess that's all I've got left to say. And we do not have ratings to go to. So please let us know in the comments what you thought of this week's episode if you've watched it. If you haven't, it's for free on YouTube. You can keep up with us. You can keep ahead of us. You can watch it and then, comment on our podcast. Don't forget to like the videos if you've listened this far. Subscribe on YouTube to get our exports, which again should be much more consistent going forward. Or follow us on Twitch to get notified whenever we stream. Next time we continue to look at Death Comes to Time with Part 4, No Child of Earth. Written by Colin Meek and starring Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, Kevin Eldon as Antimony, and Sophie Aldred as Ace. We'll see you then.